Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I'd review this little video that I found to be very particularly interesting. And this is going to be a video, overall, I believe, by the channel owned by that Shannon Sharp. I believe that this channel is called Club Shay Shay or whatever it may be called. But of course, he has very interesting guests on here from time to time. This personal guest, of course, was former great fighter of the 90s and the 2000s, Mr. Oscar De La Hoya. And of course, Shannon Sharp, he brought up the question above Mr. Oscar De La Hoya about not only where would he rank himself, but other all-time greats or other great fighters within the past 20 plus years, including Mr. Canelo Alvarez. And of course, Oscar made the debate that he believes that in his personal view that he's greater than Canelo Alvarez. And he has somewhat of the right, in my view, to debate that he's greater than some of the other great fighters out there. Do I personally believe that he's greater than Canelo Alvarez? No, personally, I don't. Because I think that Oscar De La Hoya just lost too many big fights in his career. But it is what it is. But anyways, when it comes down to it overall, I just thought this would be a very interesting video. Not only to talk about where Canelo Alvarez and Oscar De La Hoya rank, because there's always a debate about, in my view, who is the greater between these two gentlemen, which in my view it is Canelo Alvarez, because Canelo, in my view, no matter whether he moved up in weight or, stayed around a similar weight class to his weight, he pretty much was able to win the majority of the big fights in his career. Now, of course, there was a couple of fights that one could state were quote-unquote controversial, like that of the Arsenal Lara fight, or, that fight could have went either way, and of course the first Gennady Golovkin fight, that, he probably did not deserve to win that fight in my personal view. But at the end of the day, Canelo Alvarez has still defeated plenty of A-grade level fighters. And in my view, he is greater than Oscar De La Hoya. But I'm going to talk about that as the video goes along. But anyways, what they're also going to talk about is the best fighters of the past 10 years. Or not the past 10 years, excuse me, but the past 20 plus years. And overall, I'm going to talk about that as well, who, in my view, are the greatest boxers within the past 30 years. And I'm going to talk about that as this video goes along. But anyways, let's get into it. Let's see what Mr. Shannon Sharp and Mr. Oscar De La Hoya have to say.
It wouldn't be Club Shay Shay if we didn't ask you to rank some of these fighters. So where would we put Oscar De La Hoya if we said Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao, Bernard Hopkins, Roy Jones Jr., Canelo Alvarez? Who else would belong in that in your generation? I mentioned Canelo. Okay,
Trinidad,
Tito,
Ferdinand Whitaker,
Sweet Pea.
Yeah, we had all of them. We had all the greats. I would rank myself second to last.
Really?
Yeah, in front of Canelo. Yeah.
And let me tell you what, other than him being above Canelo Alvarez, I pretty much agree with that ranking. I don't believe that Oscar De La Hoya is greater than any of those fighters. Maybe you can have a case for the Felix Tito Trinidad situation. But in my view, just in my personal view, even though Oscar De La Hoya was a great fighter, he has been a little bit overrated within that of time. Because when you talk about Oscar De La Hoya, even for as talented as what he was, whenever I bring up the fact overall that, for example, that I believe that Canelo Alvarez would defeat Oscar De La Hoya, a certain amount of people would say, oh, you have no idea. Prime Oscar would destroy Canelo Alvarez and some of these other guys. Well, would he really? Because if we're really going to go there, what big fights did Oscar De La Hoya really win, really? I mean, if we're talking about, his Chavez Sr. and his Pernell Sweet Pea Whitaker wins, those are great wins, of course, but you were supposed to win those fights. At the end of the day, not only were those guys older than you, but they were about 2 weight classes smaller than you. Oscar De La Hoya is a guy, overall, like, it's not even like in the Mayweather and Canelo Alvarez situation, to where, yeah, if Canelo, was greater than Floyd, he probably should have won that fight. But at least Floyd Mayweather Jr. could compete with the height and the reach of Canelo Alvarez. Like, not only was Oscar De La Hoya heavier than those guys, but he had a clear height and reach advantage over both of those guys. Like, Oscar De La Hoya has like a 76-inch arm reach or a 74-inch arm reach, and he's like, what, 5'10"? So at the end of the day, it's like, you were supposed to beat those guys.
Why would you put Canelo last?
Because he's not better than any other fighter you just mentioned.
Right.
And he's certainly not better than me.
Right.
Well, actually, yes, he definitely is better than you, Mr. Oscar De La Hoya. Yes, he is. At the end of the day, people can get their panties in a twist all they want to about that. But yes, Mr. Canelo Alvarez is better than that of Oscar De La Hoya. It just is what it is. Now, when you talk about him being greater than some of those other guys, I probably would not put Canelo Alvarez over Floyd Mayweather or Manny Pacquiao. If you're asking me, do I believe that Canelo Alvarez would be over both of those fighters, I would probably say no. Now, in my view, Bernard Hopkins, he is within that realm. I also personally believe that Bernard Hopkins is a bit overrated. I think that he's an all-time great fighter, but I think that when you talk about the biggest win of his career, I think the biggest win of his career was over that of a Felix Tito Trinidad, someone that clearly was about a weight class and a half, probably smaller than him, or someone by at least by a weight class. Felix Tito Trinidad, of course, was successful at the 160-pound weight class, but he probably never belonged there in the first place. The fact that he was so successful there, of course, proved his greatness. But Bernard Hopkins, in my view, really should have been fighting at the 168-pound weight division or 175 even a little bit earlier. But when he fought guys that could handle his size and his level of talent, like that of a Joe Calzaghe or a Jermaine Taylor or a Roy Jones Jr. or something like that, he usually ended up losing. Now, of course, he still beat many great guys like a Kelly Pavlik and a Winky Wright and, a Antonio Tarver and other guys like that. So Bernard Hopkins, of course, he has to be ranked up there. But Bernard Hopkins, in my view, when you talk about the generational type of fights that he was in, many people use excuses as to why he ended up losing those fights. Bernard Hopkins was a great fighter, but if they also were very talented and similar in size, he was going to have a little bit of a problem with them. Now, of course, he was able to defeat Winky Wright. He was also able to defeat Kelly Pavlik. He also was able to defeat Antonio Tarver. But all those guys, in my view, were a little bit more beatable than guys like Joe Calzaghe or at the time Jermaine Taylor. But of course, Jermaine Taylor would later on show some cracks in his armor. But Bernard, of course, was an all-time great. But in my view, Bernard Hopkins and Canelo, they're right there on the same tier. Pernell Sweet Pea Whitaker, kind of around there, maybe a little bit more above, some of those guys. I'd have to take a look at his resume a little bit more. And Felix Tito Trinidad, I would have him a little bit below those guys, in my personal view. But Oscar, in my view, he's below all of them.
But here's the thing, though. You look at what he's done. 160, 168, light, heavy. What is he? Four division? He's a 4 division?
3 division.
3 division? So what, 60?
No, he's a 4-weight division champion, Oscar. Get that cocaine out your nose. Canelo Alvarez is a 4-weight division champion. He's won belts at 154 and 160, 168, and 175.
68, 70, 75?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you got Floyd. Floyd goes without saying. You got Manny Pacquiao, who's a 8 division champ.
Sure,
you got Bernard Hopkins,
Sure.
160, 168, 175.
Right.
Roy was untouchable for about a decade.
Amazing.
Roy was untouchable.
Amazing.
So you like, okay, rank. I tell you, this is how we're going to do it. Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather, Bernard Hopkins, Roy Jones Jr. Rank those guys.
That's actually a great list when you talk about ranking them. In my personal view, if you're asking me, out of those 4 fighters, rank those guys from first to last. Number 1, I would have to rank Floyd Mayweather Jr. Number 2, in my personal view, is either between Manny Pacquiao or Roy Jones Jr. That's really a great debate. But I would probably have to put Manny Pacquiao a little bit over Roy Jones Jr. because he ended up lasting a little bit better once he got a little bit older. But Roy Jones Jr., of course, was an all-time great fighter. That's a great debate, in my view, about who's the greater fighter between Manny Pacquiao and Roy Jones Jr. But because Manny Pacquiao, even once he started to go up in weight a little bit, he was able to beat some of those guys, even in his older age. And just because of his pure resume, I'd have to put Manny Pacquiao a little bit above Roy Jones Jr. But that's a tough conversation. Roy Jones Jr., in my view, would have to be 3rd. And number 4 would have to be Bernard Hopkins. Because in my view, for whatever reason, he's being ranked above certain fighters like that of a Manny Pacquiao or a Roy Jones Jr. When in my view, Bernard Hopkins at his absolute peak, even at his absolute best, was not those fighters. It is what it is. Bernard Hopkins was an all-time great fighter. He wasn't Floyd Mayweather. He wasn't Manny Pacquiao, and he wasn't Roy Jones Jr.
I fought 3 of those guys that you just mentioned, and they all beat
And you lost to all of them.
me. So the key here is that I fought them, and I was willing to fight them, and I fought them in order to make history, right?
Right, and basically what that is Oscar De La Hoya's way of saying he's taking a shot at Canelo Alvarez once again is that he's not taking certain fights. Well, listen, what I'll state is this overall about Mr. Canelo Alvarez. Right now, he is going to have to go under some scrutiny because he is not fighting either David Benavidez nor David Morrell. And those are the 2 fights that everybody wants to see. Understandably so. So once again, Those are the fights that everybody wants to see. Canelo is eventually going to have to try to take those fights. That being stated, this narrative of Canelo Alvarez never taking any big fights throughout his career, this narrative also has to stop because Canelo Alvarez once again has fought plenty of A-grade level names in his career. And like I've already stated, when you talk about the past 10 years, Canelo Alvarez has fought about a dozen A-grade level names. When you talk about, once again, when you talk about, what's his name? Austin Trout, when Canelo Alvarez had his first legitimate A-grade level fight, Canelo was able to win that one at about 22 or 21 years old, I believe, or 22 years old. And then of course later on he was able to defeat Araceli Lara. Now that was a very tough fight that could have went either way, but they gave it to Canelo Alvarez. It was a very, very tough fight, and Canelo, of course, just ended up edging it out on the scorecards. All right, so he beat Araceli Lara, and then of course after that he beat Miguel Cotto. Not when Miguel Cotto, of course, was looked at the absolute peak of his powers, but when he was the WBC and Ring Magazine champion. So this narrative of Miguel Cotto being washed up as a fighter, no, it's just not the case. And then, of course, after that, he was able to go after that of a Gennady Triple G Golovkin. I do believe that Canelo Alvarez lost the first fight against that of a Gennady Triple G Golovkin. But then in the rematch, I thought Canelo Alvarez had redeemed himself, and I thought that he won the fight about 7 rounds to 5, which, of course, was a gigantic win in his career. And if we're really going to go there, bigger than any of the wins that Oscar De La Hoya has in his career. And I know that a lot of people overall are going to say, what are you talking about? He was able to get the decision over Penelope Whitaker and Julio Cesar Chavez. Right, but once again, Canelo Alvarez was a bit smaller than Gennady Golovkin, and Gennady Golovkin was looked at as one of the top 5 pound-for-pound fighters in the world. When Oscar De La Hoya really started to move up the weight classes and fight guys his own similar size, or fight guys that could handle his size, he wasn't really as great anymore. And that's why I said, with certain guys like a Teofimo Lopez and a Devin Haney, they look very good at the 135-pound weight class, but we're going to see truly how great they are at the 140-pound weight class, and we've already seen a lot of cracks within their armor. I thought that, of course, Devin Haney lost a Ryan Garcia fight. Of course, it was turned to a no contest because it was turned to a no contest because Ryan Garcia, of course, was caught on that of performance-enhancing drugs. But of course, Devin Haney, in my view, he showed a lot of cracks in his armor in that fight. Teofimo Lopez, he's shown cracks within his armor against George Kambosos, Jermaine Ortiz, what the hell is that dude's name? Martin, Sandor Martin, the Spaniard. He's shown a certain amount of cracks, within that, so it is what it is.
Which fighter?
But then, of course, afterwards, after Gennady Golovkin, of course, he was able to defeat Danny Jacobs. That would be his 5th A-grade level name. And then, of course, he was able to get that of a Caleb Plant on there. That's a 6. Callum Smith, his 7th. And then Billy Joe Saunders, his 8th. And then, of course, after that, you're talking about Sergey the Crusher Kovalev, who was, of course, not at his absolute peak anymore, but still an A-grade level fighter. Was coming off of 2 decent wins over Eleider Alvarez, avenging his loss, and then Anthony Yard. So it's not like he was not beating top contenders, and Canelo was able to defeat him. And then, of course, afterwards, you got Jamel Charlo, and then Jaime Munguia. All those fighters you can debate as A-grade level wins, every single one of them.
Don't do today nowadays. No, they just don't. They wait till you get older. I was waiting for myself to get older to fight those guys in their prime.
Right.
So except for Bernard Hopkins, that was 48 years old when I fought him, but he's a machine, that.
But you had moved up. You moved to
I
160
moved up
to fight
160 and fight him to make history.
The 2 best wins in Bernard Hopkins' career, or at least 2 of his best wins, were over Oscar De La Hoya and Felix Tito Trinidad. And neither of those guys really belonged at 160 pounds in the first place. So that's why, in my view, even though I give him credit over the Felix Tito Trinidad win, that's like the win that Dimitri Bivol has over Canelo Alvarez, which is a great win. But at the end of the day, if you're not able to beat any of the guys of your natural own same size, at least the biggest fights of your career, then to me it doesn't really mean as much. It just is what it is. Now, of course, Bernard, once again, he was able to beat plenty of great fighters. He was able to beat Winky Wright, Kelly Pavlik, and Antonio Tarver, but those guys were not quite on the level of a Roy Jones Jr. or a Joe Calzaghe. So Bernard Hopkins, in my view, even though many people rank him, very, very high, and he is a very, very high-level fighter, in my view, he's more closer overall to the level of a Miguel Cotto or an Oscar De La Hoya, than really what he is a Floyd Mayweather or a Manny Pacquiao or a Roy Jones Jr. He's really more closer to that level.
That's what it's all about. So I think look, Floyd is a great fighter. Obviously, he's undefeated. everybody can make an argument. Well, he's not the best. Yes, he is the best. Everybody has their opinion, and that's fine. That's okay. You look at their records. Okay, well, maybe with this guy he lost. Maybe it was controversial. Maybe it was a close fight. Everybody has those on their records.
Right.
I have 3 losses that I can't debate. With Pacquiao because he stopped me.
Right.
With Hopkins because he stopped me. And probably who else? Shane Mosley.
I will state this overall in the rematch against Sugar Shane Mosley. I do not believe that Shane Mosley ended up winning that fight against Oscar De La Hoya. So that being stated, there is 1 or 2 losses in Oscar De La Hoya's career that you could debate could have went his way in the Felix Tito Trinidad fight and also in the Sugar Shane Mosley rematch. However, that being stated, a big part of the reason why Oscar is not on the same level as a Canelo Alvarez, in my view, is because of the way that he was able to lose to Sugar Shane Mosley when he was moving up 2 weight classes from 135 to 147. And some people may say, well, Canelo Alvarez lost to Floyd Mayweather Jr. when Floyd Mayweather Jr. probably was about 15 to 20 pounds lighter than him. And that's, a very fair point. But Floyd Mayweather Jr. is on a whole different level than what a Sugar Shane Mosley is. And Floyd Mayweather Jr. not only is a decent amount more skilled than even the best of the best version of Sugar Shane Mosley, but on top of that, when it comes down to it, Sugar Shane Mosley was legit moving up 2 weight classes. Floyd had already fought at 154 pounds before. So Oscar De La Hoya, in my view, that loss against Sugar Shane Mosley, that's another reason why overall I just can't put him over someone like a Canelo Alvarez. I just can't do it. And Oscar also ended up losing to that of a Floyd Mayweather Jr. Now, he gave him a tougher fight than what a Floyd Mayweather Jr. did, than what a Canelo Alvarez did. But that being stated, when you also take a look at the skill set, in my view, comparative to both Oscar De La Hoya and Canelo Alvarez, I think that Oscar De La Hoya is more skilled than Oscar. I think that Canelo is more skilled than Oscar in almost every single facet. I think that he's more skilled overall within his head movement. Oscar was never really that great in terms of head movement, at least not in terms of some other all-time greats. I think that he's the better defensive fighter. I think that he has the better chin comparative of the two, and Oscar has a pretty damn good chin. I think that, to be honest with you, the only 2 categories that I would really give Oscar over Canelo Alvarez, once again, would be the feet, movement, and also that of the footwork, and also that of the hand speed. To be honest with you, that's really about the only things. I don't think that I would give him any other category over Canelo.
The first one,
Right.
which was an epic fight at the Staples Center, now Crypto Arena. So those fights there, I cannot debate with anybody that I lost. But the other fights, yeah, they're debatable. You can make the argument, just like every other fighter that you just mentioned now on the list. Every fighter has their debatable losses and wins. Are they great? Yes. Are they the very, very best? Who knows? It's a debate.
Oscar, what's going on with you and Canelo? You promoted Canelo even when a lot of...
What's going on with Oscar De La Hoya and Canelo Alvarez is that Canelo Alvarez eventually got out of Golden Boy because Oscar De La Hoya was trying to overall control Canelo Alvarez in a way that Canelo Alvarez didn't want to be controlled. And then Canelo Alvarez ended up leaving, and then that pretty much was the best asset that Oscar De La Hoya has ever had, and Oscar De La Hoya has been bitter ever since. And that's why he's went after Canelo Alvarez for many years now, and he'll even tell you that himself. He's recently stated that.
Fighters left you, Canelo stayed.
Yeah.
What's the beef? What's the headbutting with you and Canelo?
I literally feel, Canelo changed over time. When you start making money.
Yeah, $300 million to do that.
Yeah,
Oscar.
he changed a bit, and yeah, it's just odd. He's saying all this.
Upgrade to Google Fiber and pay one simple bill every month.
What about extra fees?
All this nonsense about that I stole from him and ripped him off and this and that. First of all,
right, and Oscar De La Hoya, this is not the only time that we've heard this from a fighter from your stable. We've heard overall potentially that you've screwed over a multitude of fighters. So at the end of the day, is it very possible? It is very possible.
I'm a legitimate company, okay, where we make a lot of money and everything is by the book. Come check my books. Come bring in your auditors. And he's done that over the years. I just feel that a lot of times fighters get jealous, And I'm not saying this to stroke my ego or anything, but I would walk into a room and Canelo's giving interviews. I would walk in and then everybody would put all their attention to me.
Right.
Oh, Oscar, the promoter. Oh, this and that. I just feel that it maybe got to him a bit, Then he started.
Right, Oscar. So you're telling me that the reason why there's beef is because Canelo Alvarez got jealous over you. Is that why Canelo Alvarez rarely mentions your ass anymore and you can't stop talking about him? If you want to know overall a relationship and who ended up overall being more bitter and who ended up being more jealous at the end, look and see overall who ends up talking about it more between the two. Canelo Alvarez, I rarely see him ever mention Oscar De La Hoya ever. Oscar De La Hoya is always the one mentioning Canelo Alvarez.
Saying that I was ripping him off and this and that, and it's pretty sad because I have nothing against him. I really don't.
Bullshit, but go ahead and continue.
Personally, I just feel that that's and the whispers in the ears.
Right. Give me your top 3 Mexican fighters of all time.
Of all time.
Ooh, they got some good ones. Julio Cesar.
Yeah.
When you talk about the top 3 Mexican fighters of all time, it depends on whether you count Mexican-American fighters or not. But when you talk about the top 3 Mexican fighters of all time, in my view, you're talking about Julio Cesar Chavez Sr., you're talking about Canelo Alvarez, and then afterwards, either Juan Manuel Marquez or Salvador Sanchez, but probably Juan Manuel Marquez because, even for as skilled as what Salvador Sanchez was, I just can't place someone overall that was as lightly accomplished as what he was, But I mean, that's a debate. If you wanted to put him up there, you could. But in my view, Canelo Alvarez is within that top 3.
Chavez, De La Hoya,
Salvador
Canelo.
Sanchez. Salvador Sanchez was a good one. He passed at an early age, but he beat Azuma Nelson in his prime. I think he died at 22, 23. Could have been.
Roy Jones mentioned him when I spoke to him. He
Salvador
mentioned Sanchez.
There's a fighter that people won't know of. They call it El Puas. You have Julio Cesar Chavez. Canelo's gonna be up there, top 10. So yeah.
Ricardo Lopez.
Right, but he's higher than top 10, Oscar. Stop bullshitting.
Oh, Ricardo Lopez, who was undefeated as well.
Yeah.
I think he had one draw. He was 50 and
Ricardo Lopez, I believe his name Finito Lopez. Yes, he's also up there as well in my personal view, but I just don't know enough about his resume overall, once again, to really comment.
Oh, and one draw. But a lot of great Mexican fighters. But I have to respect Canelo with what he's accomplished, and I'll put him top 10.
Wow. Top 10? I ain't asking for 3, so he ain't gonna guess. I guess if he top 10, he ain't making your top 3. Where are you on celebrity boxing? I don't know. This wasn't celebrity, but when Floyd fought Conor.
But anyways, that's pretty much overall about it, I believe, for this interview. I just wanted to review that. I thought it would be very particularly interesting. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see where this goes. But I just thought that was a very interesting conversation. But that's pretty much about it for today. Talk to you all later.